The Forgotten Bell. In a small, mist-shrouded town tucked between the dense folds of an ancient forest, there stood an abandoned church. Its stone walls were cloaked in creeping ivy, and its rotting wooden doors creaked with every gust of wind. Above the church hung a bell tower, the bell itself rusted and silent for nearly a century. Locals whispered about the bell, saying it hadn't rung since the Great Storm of 1883. That storm had claimed the lives of the town's entire choir during a midnight service. No one dared approach the church after sunset. Eliza, a young journalist, had recently moved to the town. Fascinated by the legend, she decided to uncover the truth behind the stories. Armed with a flashlight and a camera, she ventured to the church one chilly autumn evening, her breath visible in the crisp air. The heavy doors groaned as she pushed them open. Inside, the air was damp, carrying the faint smell of mildew and decay. The pews were covered in thick layers of dust, and the stained glass windows, once vibrant, were now muted and broken in places. Eliza's flashlight beam settled on the altar, where a faded hymn book lay open, its pages fluttering despite the lack of wind. Her curiosity deepened as she noticed a staircase spiraling up to the bell tower. Resolute, she climbed the creaking wooden steps, each one groaning louder than the last, as if warning her to turn back. At the top, she found the bell. It was massive, its surface marred by rust and time. An old, frayed rope hung from it, swaying slightly, even though there was no breeze. As Eliza moved closer, she noticed something odd, a faint, rhythmic sound, like a heartbeat, coming from the bell itself. She hesitated, then reached out to touch the bell's cold metal surface. The moment her fingers made contact, a deafening chime echoed through the tower, vibrating her bones and rattling the walls. The rope jerked violently, though no one pulled it. Eliza stumbled back, her flashlight dropping and rolling to the floor, its beam casting wild, spinning shadows. The bell continued to toll, its mournful sound reverberating through the town. From the corner of her eye, Eliza saw figures materializing in the darkness, pale, translucent shapes with hollow eyes. They were dressed in choir robes, their mouths open in silent screams. One of the figures, a tall man with a gaunt face, stepped forward. His voice was a hollow whisper. "Why have you disturbed our rest?" Eliza's throat tightened. I didn't mean to. I just wanted to know the truth." The ghostly figure tilted his head, studying her. "The truth is buried here, with us." He gestured toward the floor, where a faint pattern of symbols glowed around the base of the bell. Summoning her courage, Eliza followed the ghost's gesture and crouched to examine the symbols. They seemed to form a binding circle etched deep into the floor. Realization dawned. This wasn't just a bell tower. It was a prison for restless spirits. The storm of 1883 hadn't been natural. It had been summoned by an ancient ritual gone horribly wrong. The ghost choir began to sing, their voices haunting and beautiful, weaving an ancient melody that resonated with both sorrow and power. The bell's toll grew louder, its sound almost unbearable. "Eliza!" the lead ghost shouted, his voice rising above the cacophony. "You must break the circle, free us, or we will be trapped here forever." Her hands trembled as she reached for the glowing symbols. Using a jagged piece of wood from the floor, she scratched at the lines, breaking the intricate design. The moment the circle was incomplete, the bells stopped ringing and a deafening silence filled the tower. The spirits began to dissolve, their forms flickering like candle flames in the wind. The lead ghost smiled faintly. "Thank you," he whispered, before fading completely. As the last of the ghostly forms dissolved into flickering lights, a profound stillness settled over the bell tower. Eliza sank to her knees, the jagged piece of wood still clutched in her trembling hand. The room felt lighter, as though the oppressive weight that had hung in the air was finally lifted. The lead ghost's faint smile lingered in her mind. His expression wasn't one of vengeance or sadness, but of gratitude. Eliza couldn't help but wonder what he and the others had endured for over a century, trapped between life and death, unable to move on. Shaking herself out of her thoughts, she retrieved her flashlight and descended the spiraling staircase. The creaks and groans of the wooden steps seemed less menacing now, almost welcoming. As she reached the church's nave, the first light of dawn spilled through the broken stained glass windows, casting a kaleidoscope of soft colors across the dusty floor. Eliza hesitated near the altar, where the hymn book still lay open. This time the pages no longer fluttered unnaturally. A faint breeze carried the scent of morning dew, and for the first time she felt at peace in the old church. Outside, the town was waking up. The mist that usually clung stubbornly to the streets was lifting, revealing the quaint charm of the place. Villagers paused in their routines, looking toward the bell tower, where a strange sense of calm seemed to radiate. Eliza approached an elderly woman sitting on a bench near the church gates. The woman had been one of the few locals willing to speak to her before her investigation. "It's over," Eliza said softly, her voice carrying a mixture of exhaustion and relief. The woman's eyes widened in understanding. "The bell? It won't ring again, will it?" Eliza shook her head. "No, they're free now." The old woman nodded, her weathered face breaking into a wistful smile. "You've done something good, child. Perhaps now the town can heal." Eliza smiled faintly in return, but she knew she couldn't stay. The story she had uncovered, the horrors she had faced, would stay with her forever. She had ventured into the darkness, seeking the truth, and emerged changed. As she walked away from the church, she cast one final glance at the bower. For a brief moment, she thought she saw the faint outline of the lead ghost standing there, his translucent form watching her with a serene expression. Then he was gone. Months later, Eliza published her account of the church and its haunted bell tower, not as a news article, but as a personal story under a pseudonym. She described the forgotten choir, the ancient ritual gone wrong, and the courage it took to confront the unknown. Her story became an urban legend, shared in whispers and passed down through generations. The town, once shrouded in fear, found new life. And though the bell tower remained silent, its haunting tale became a symbol of hope, proof that even the deepest wounds could be healed, and even the most restless spirits could find peace. But late at night, when the wind blew just right, some swore they could hear faint singing echoing through the forest, a choir's final hymn carried away on the breeze. Chapter 2. Echoes of the Bell. It had been 6 months since Eliza left the town behind, yet the experience lingered like a shadow. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the flickering forms of the ghostly choir and heard the haunting chime of the bell echoing in her dreams. She told herself the story was over, but deep down, she knew that some things never truly end. Eliza had returned to the city, where life buzzed with an energy she found comforting. At first, the noise, the people, and the pace dulled the edges of her memories, but only for a while. The story of the bell tower had been published in a niche anthology of supernatural tales, earning her a modest sum and a reputation among paranormal enthusiasts. Letters began pouring in from readers, some praising her bravery, others sharing tales of their own brushes with the unknown. But one letter stood out. It arrived in a plain envelope with no return address, the handwriting shaky and uneven. Inside was a single sheet of paper, its message chillingly concise. "The bell tolls once more. Return before it's too late." Eliza's heart raced as she stared at the letter. The bell couldn't ring again. It wasn't possible. The spirits had been freed. She had broken the circle, and yet a gnawing sense of dread began to creep in. She tried to dismiss it as a prank, the work of someone who had read her story and wanted to stir trouble. But late that night, as she lay in bed, she swore she heard the faint, distant toll of a bell. Chapter 3. The Callback. Eliza couldn't ignore the letter. Against her better judgment, she packed her camera, flashlight, and a notebook, determined to find answers. As she drove back to the small town, a storm brewed on the horizon, dark clouds roiling like restless spirits. When she arrived, the town felt different. The cheerful vibrancy she had left behind was gone, replaced by an uneasy quiet. The villagers avoided her gaze, their faces pale and drawn. The old woman who had once spoken to her was nowhere to be found. The church was as she remembered it, abandoned and weathered, but now the bell tower had an air of menace. The stone walls seemed darker, the ivy curling like skeletal fingers. Eliza hesitated at the entrance, her hand trembling as she pushed open the heavy wooden doors. Inside, the air was colder than before, and the hymn book on the altar was missing. The faint sound of singing reached her ears, a mournful melody that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. She called out, her voice echoing in the empty hall. "Who's there?" A A sudden crash from the bell tower made her jump. Gripping her flashlight tightly, she climbed the staircase once more, each step feeling like a descent into something far darker than the first time. At the top, she found the bell swinging gently, though there was no wind and no rope to pull it. A symbol she didn't recognize had been carved into the floor, a new circle, glowing faintly with an unnatural light. Before she could move, a shadowy figure emerged from the darkness. It wasn't one of the spirits she had freed, but something else entirely. Its form was shrouded in black mist, its eyes glowing like embers. When it spoke, its voice was deep and resonant, filled with ancient malice. "You shouldn't have returned," it said, its tone laced with warning. Eliza's voice shook. "Who are you? What do you want?" The figure stepped closer, and she felt a chill seep into her bones. "The bell's purpose was not fulfilled. You freed them before their debt was paid." "Debt?" she whispered. "Ahai, the bell is not merely a prison. It is a bridge, a way for what lies beyond to claim what is owed." Eliza realized with growing horror that by breaking the circle, she had not only freed the spirits, but also disrupted a balance that had kept something far darker at bay. The bell's toll had not been a cry for freedom, but a warning. Chapter 4. The Bargain. Eliza's instincts screamed at her to run, but her feet were rooted to the spot. The figure gestured to the glowing circle on the floor. "It must be completed. Only then will the balance be restored." "How?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "You must summon the choir again. Their song is the key. But this time, they will not leave." Eliza's heart sank. The spirits she had freed had finally found peace. Calling them back would mean condemning them once more. "There has to be another way," she said, desperation creeping into her voice. The figure's eyes burned brighter. "You have until the bell tolls 3 times. If the circle remains incomplete, the bridge will open, and this world will fall." Eliza was left alone in the tower, the circle glowing ominously at her feet. She had faced fear before, but this was different. The stakes were higher, and the choices crueler. Her mind raced as she tried to think of another way, a way to fix what she had unknowingly broken, without sacrificing the spirits who had trusted her. But as the first toll of the bell rang out, she knew time was running out. Chapter 5. The First Toll. The sound of the bell reverberated through the bell tower, shaking the walls and rattling Eliza to her core. She staggered backward, her flashlight flickering as the floor beneath her seemed to pulse with the toll's vibrations. The glowing circle grew brighter, its intricate symbols shifting and rearranging as if alive. Eliza's mind raced. The choir's spirits had been at rest, their gratitude palpable when she had broken the original circle. To call them back now felt like a betrayal, but the shadowy figure's warning was clear. If she didn't complete the circle, something far worse would emerge. Taking a deep breath, Eliza knelt beside the glowing lines, studying their patterns. They were similar to the original circle, but more complex, with layers of symbols and runes she didn't recognize. The jagged piece of wood she'd used months ago lay discarded nearby, as though waiting for her. The second toll rang out, louder and more menacing than the first. Dust and debris rained from the ceiling, and the bell's vibration sent cracks spidering through the walls. The air grew heavier, colder, and Eliza could feel the presence of something immense pressing against the fabric of reality. Her fingers trembled as she picked up the wood and began scratching at the lines. She didn't know what she was doing, but instinct guided her. She added to the symbols, improvising based on fragments of research she had done after her first encounter. If the circle was a prison, perhaps it could also serve as a shield, something to contain whatever was trying to break through. As she worked, faint whispers began to echo through the tower. At first they were incoherent, but soon she recognized voices. Familiar ones, the choir. Their mournful hymn began to fill the space, the sound growing louder with each passing moment. Eliza froze as ghostly forms began to emerge from the shadows, their faces etched with sorrow and confusion. The lead ghost appeared last, his translucent form flickering like a dying flame. His hollow eyes fixed on her, and his voice was heavy with accusation. "Why have you summoned us again?" "I didn't want to," Eliza said, her voice breaking. "But the bell, something's wrong. It's trying to open a bridge to something dark. I need your help." The lead ghost's expression softened, but only slightly. We cannot return to our prison. We were freed. Eliza pointed to the glowing circle. This isn't a prison. It's a seal. If it isn't completed, the bridge will open, and whatever's on the other side will come through. The choir exchanged uneasy glances, their forms flickering more violently as the bell tower trembled under the weight of the third toll. The lead ghost stepped closer, his form towering over her. If we sing again, we will be bound. Do you understand what you are asking? Eliza nodded, tears streaming down her face. I do. But if you don't, countless lives will be lost. I'll stay with you. I'll bear the weight of it, whatever it takes. Just don't let it break through. The final hymn. The lead ghost turned to the others, his voice steady. We must sing. The spirits nodded, their resolve solidifying despite the pain etched on their faces. They formed a circle around Eliza, their hymn swelling in volume. The haunting melody resonated with power, weaving through the cymbals and infusing the glowing circle with light. The cymbals flared brighter, their patterns locking into place as the choir's song grew stronger. The bell tower shook violently, the air crackling with energy. The shadowy figure reappeared, its form writhing as though in agony. You think you can stop it? It hissed, its voice laced with fury. The bridge cannot be sealed forever. Eliza stood her ground, her voice rising above the chaos. Maybe not, but we'll stop it for now. The figure lunged at her, but before it could reach her, the circle erupted with light. The combined power of the choir's hymn and the completed seal sent a wave of energy rippling outward, forcing the figure back into the void. The bell rang a final, deafening toll before falling silent, the vibrations fading into stillness. The spirits began to dissolve once more, their forms flickering like candle flames. The lead ghost turned to Eliza, his expression one of quiet acceptance. You kept your promise. Thank you. As he faded, Eliza felt a strange warmth fill the bell tower, a sense of peace she hadn't known since her first visit. The circle dimmed, its symbols etched permanently into the stone. The bell tower stood silent once more, its purpose fulfilled. Chapter 7. A New Legacy. Eliza left the town the next day, her heart heavy, but her resolve stronger than ever. She had sealed the bridge, but she knew the bell tower's secrets would never truly rest. The story she carried wasn't just hers. It belonged to the spirits, the town, and anyone brave enough to face the darkness. She began writing again, this time chronicling the deeper truths she had uncovered. Her book, The Forgotten Bell, Echoes of the Past, became a sensation, drawing readers from all over the world. Some called it fiction, others a warning. But Eliza knew the truth, and though she never returned to the bell tower, she kept a single piece of the broken seal on her desk, a reminder that even the smallest acts of courage could hold back the greatest darkness.